want any beer right now is because
Is your little hungover still?
it's like a week-long hangover. No, I'm just, it's the emotional hangover from the physical hangover.
I understand. Okay.
Oktoberfest is my favorite holiday.
Is that right?
Yeah, I live it up.
Is it a family reason
Then
that
I pay the
Oktoberfest?
price. No. I just, for some reason, it makes me so happy. I can't explain it. People sitting around in tents drinking beer and eating shitty food is like, and listening to polka, I love it.
What is your do you have are you German?
So my last
background?
name is German.
Let me interrupt. Let me introduce you
Okay,
first.
all
Sorry,
right.
I'm recording and this was crazy.
You tricked me.
Brianna Matzke?
Yeah,
Am I saying that correct?
it's Brianna.
Brianna,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have a pet peeve when people don't correct me. If I say, students will be like, my name is, I'll say it incorrectly, and they're like, okay. And then 9 months goes by and I've been saying it wrong, so I appreciate that. Brianna Matzke.
Yeah.
We've already started talking, but I appreciate you doing this podcast with me because it's the first one in person, and I'm very grateful for that. We are not videoing it on purpose because
Yeah.
I think this is good. Just having a conversation, and
We're just chatting.
I will just to be honest, I'm terribly nervous for the first in-person podcast. I feel like the last 2 years have been. I feel like I got good at Zoom.
Yeah.
Like I could time the delay a little bit, and I knew how to do it. And so, pardon my clunkiness if I'm a little rusty on the in-person chat, but I appreciate you doing it. But welcome.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
So we were chatting a little bit in the car coming up here, but before we get into anything, we were talking a little bit about some Steve Reich stuff prior, and Facebook and how we are all communicating with each other, all this stuff. But before we get into that, can you just tell me a little bit about baby Brianna? Where'd you come from? What got you into music? What were your folks like that sort of stuff?
Sure. So I grew up in Minnesota, and you were saying you grew up in a tiny town in Ohio. So I grew up in a bunch of small towns in Minnesota. We moved around a lot as I was growing up, so I never spent more than 5 or 6 years tops.
But all in Minnesota?
But always in Minnesota, yeah.
Okay.
So when I was born, my dad had a farm, and my mom was the high school band director, and the town that we lived in was 200 people. It was a tiny little town.
Wait, so that you grew up on a farm?
Well,
or your dad had a
so
farm?
Farming in the 80s was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And so, my mom wanted to raise a family, and she was pretty much like, farming's not going to be stable enough for us to raise a family. So my dad went back to school, and he got his degrees, whatever he needed to become an agricultural loan officer, and he got into banking. And so that's been his whole career. And that's why we moved around so much, is because he was always taking new positions and working his way up in that field.
I'm sorry to make this part about your dad, but this is really interesting to me. What kind of farm was it? Farms are that's a broad term. What did he, was it?
I wish I could tell you specifically. I know he did a bunch of different things. We had some livestock for a while, but I was 2 years old by the time he had stopped doing that.
Did you ever talk? One of the my dad passed away in 2009, and one of the things I wish that I would had talked to him about is a little bit about just what was your head like when you were 42?
Yeah.
I remember when my dad was 42, but I was tiny, It's fascinating to me that he was a farmer and then went to sell agricultural, what was it again?
He's an agricultural loan officer.
Loan officer.
So he's working for the bank, giving farmers loans for seed, livestock, equipment, and machinery, buildings, all of that.
Did you ever talk to him about what it was like to go from, it's like you being a pianist and all of a sudden being now I'm going to be a construction worker?
Well,
what was that like for him?
I have talked to him about it a little bit. He's not a super effusive, expressive person. He's a man of few words. And so he's explained the situation in his own way to me. He grew up on a farm. Farming means something to him very deep. It's directly connected to the heart of who he is as a person and what he thinks is important in the world. So I think it was in many ways kind of heartbreaking for him to not be able to do that for his career, but at the same time, I know that he's a very community-minded person. He cares very deeply for these small towns that are just fighting to survive in the Midwest. And he knows that his role running a small bank, a small community bank in one of those small towns means he's at the heart of the life of that community, and he can really help people when they need it financially. And so, I think he always misses farming, but he's still very much part of that community and helping to support other people who are. And
it makes total sense. I mean, that I don't want to imply it. There's no value judgment or implication on my end. It's fascinating to me. My dad changed careers a few times, but he was always in sales. He was selling something, like trucks or pop or whatever it was. He was always selling. But anyway, what did your mom do?
She was the high school band director. And then I'm the oldest of 4 kids. So when she had her 3rd kid, she retired and became a stay-at-home mom. Okay. She still kept teaching piano lessons and was a substitute teacher whenever she could. But yeah, that's what she did when we were growing up.
And is that where you got the musical, where did the music side of what you do come into play?
There's musicians on both sides of my family, nobody professional. But yeah, there's definitely a love of music that runs through my mom's side and my dad's side. But yeah, we had a piano in the house, and I grew up going with my mom to her pep band gigs at the high school gym and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I just grew up around music. We grew up singing in the car all the time. That was how we kept ourselves entertained in the car. And the piano thing came in, I think I was a pretty, precocious kid. And my mom had a beginner piano book, and I knew how to read by the time I was 4. And so apparently my mom, I don't remember this, but she says that I just sat down at the piano and just started reading what it said in the book and started to play what was written in the book. And
I'm going to trust your mom that that's what happened, but I think that's also what every mom sees and hears.
Yeah.
I don't know, they just started playing the Goldberg variations. It just came poured out of their little fingers.
Yeah, that's fair. And I guess she showed me some things too, of course. But by the time I was, I think 7 or 8, it was time to get a teacher.
And did they, as you were growing up, what was the musical, were there any talks of what you want to do for a living, or was it totally organic the way it?
Oh no, it was just, I just played the piano. I don't know, it was one of the many things that I did. It definitely was not encouraged to be a professional performer. Being a teacher would have been a reasonable thing and was encouraged, certainly. But, going through school, I was one of those kids. I did everything. I did sports, I did theater, band, choir. I played the oboe, I sang. I did dance lessons, everything. And I was on the honor roll and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so I think my parents, especially my dad, expected that I was going to go to one of the small liberal arts schools that is in Minnesota, get a nice scholarship, not have to pay much for school, and become a high school English teacher. That's not what I wanted to do.
My parents were my mom is a high school, or was a high school French and Spanish teacher. She's retired now. My dad was a salesman.
Yeah.
So education similarly was what they knew, and was you can get health insurance through that. That was the big thing with my parents, was get health insurance, whatever you do. And luckily, when I got the job with So, I could at least tell my mom I had health insurance. I didn't have much of a salary, but I did have health insurance. But music was never discouraged. But it was there was a point where in high school where I remember looking my mom and dad in the face and being I want to do what Joan Wenzel does. And Joan was my percussion teacher since 5th grade. And the look on their face was damn it.
We messed up.
When you were in high school, you did go on to conservatory after that. So how did that conversation happen?
1 second. I'm worried my cell phone's on. Oh, sorry.
It's fine.
Or did I leave it in the car? Okay. I think I must have left it in the car because I don't see her. Okay. Sorry.
No
So,
problem.
yeah, that conversation was a difficult one. My junior year of high school started driving into the Twin Cities for piano lessons with a teacher who was really good, like exclusive. Like I had to audition to get in with her, and I don't know. I guess maybe I had gone to a piano camp or something, and people were talking about being a music major, and so I went to my piano teacher and I said, like, could I do this? Like, could I go to music school? Am I good enough to do that? And she's like, if you practice, yeah, definitely. So once she said that it was something I could do, I decided it was something I wanted to do. And so started working on putting together a program. I talked with her about what schools to apply for. So we made a list, Oberlin, Peabody, a bunch of other universities. And so my parents knew nothing about how that process was going to go because they're not in that world at all.
Yeah.
And my teacher honestly was only partially in that world too. And so I had to book the plane tickets and the hotel rooms. I had to figure out how to make an audition tape, all of that stuff. I was just on my own for all of it. And all through this process, I also applied to the University of Minnesota for the English program.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just to have something else there.
Was it like plan B or?
I think a little. Yeah. And so, yeah, my dad refused to participate in a lot of that. He did drive me to one of the auditions to show his support, but I think he was so worried about the loans more than anything. He was just worried, how are you going to pay for this? He was thinking, you could go to school in Minnesota for free. But I don't know. I bombed all of those auditions. I just didn't know how to prepare for something like that.
Yeah. What year would this have been?
2004.
I mean, I do think it's important to note, and I do feel a little bit sometimes when I bring this up on podcasts, like Old Man Quillen is here to just remind you, like, not you, but the younger listeners, like young students have zero idea that in 2004 you checked your email like once a week.
Yeah.
Maybe. And you're like, oh, cool, somebody emailed me about a gig 9 days ago. Yeah. And that wasn't stressful. You then called the person on the phone or whatever, and there was no YouTube, there was no tutorial video there to show a young high school person how to prepare for, or even that you might have to sight read, or someone might ask you some sort of historical context question about the piece you're playing. Nobody told us any of that. And anyway, I'm not complaining, but I just do and it's not walked uphill both ways in the snow with no shoes sort of thing, but it's not that. There was a difference, okay? Some folks have it a little easier now. There's way more tutorials. There were no recordings of any pieces I was playing.
Yeah, right, unless
as a percussionist, it's not like you could go to YouTube to hear this really obscure multiple percussion setup that had this weird instrument that you didn't know what it was, And now you do, anyway, just all that is to say, I just wanted to sort of put a pin in that, that was a struggle to walk in blind a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. I did everything I could with what I had. But it also was a struggle because of where I was coming from, I guess. I was the small town piano girl. The big deal performance for me was playing the prelude and offertory for church on Sunday.
Well, let me ask you about this, because this is an interesting. I just want to drill down on that because, again, not to keep comparing it to I'm a small town Ohio boy. Yeah. And there is a big insecurity. You hear about New York, or you watch a piano player play Carnegie Hall, and so you're like, well, if I'm not doing that, there's no way, For you, what, especially in piano, of all of the instrument groups to have that insecurity, can you just talk a little bit about what talk a little bit about that. I don't have that. I'm playing a concerto where I'm snapping twigs, and nobody knows if I'm doing it well or not because there's not 200 years of history behind it of critique and, you know, repertoire. Like, what was your mind like that? And has it changed much now? Like, you're 34.
It's been a journey. That's been a journey. You know, when I was auditioning at Oberlin for undergrad back in 2004, 2005, I was playing the slow movement of my Beethoven sonata. It was my first Beethoven sonata I'd ever learned in my whole life. And I was playing the slow movement and not doing very well. And so justifiably, maybe, one of the faculty members who were seated at a table behind my back, so I couldn't see them, but it was a room, not a stage, so they were really close to me. One of them leaned over to the person next to them and said, "She doesn't know this very well, does she?"
But audible enough.
Definitely meant for me to hear. You know, that was the first time anything like that had ever happened to me. And I have to say that over the years in the piano world, I've had way more experiences like that than anyone should have to go through. You know, but that's just part of the piano world. Is there is this really deep tradition and history and this sort of standard repertoire and standard of excellence. And if you don't fit into that in a particular way, it can be a little bit difficult to know if you are welcomed and if you belong. So I definitely have felt very insecure about my facility, my abilities.
I mean, in particular, early on, the insecurity makes a ton of sense. I mean, I still have insecurities still, but like it makes total sense when you're 19 or whatever. Like that's kind of par for the course. As you go along and you then get facility, and then you also are at institutions like Oberlin or CCM, you know, Cincinnati here, like where it's like, oh, okay, I can hang. Like I'm not the worst player in the room. Like that, and then you start to feel a little better about yourself. Like, how has that ebbed and flowed for you now that you're out of school? Like, do you still have that same feeling, or is it?
I mean, sure. Oh gosh, how do I even explain this? I stopped caring somewhere in during my doctoral degree. I stopped caring if I was the best or worst pianist in the room, and I began to realize, thanks in large part to the mentorship of my teacher, Elizabeth Pridnoff, she helped me realize like it's about finding my niche and what I want to express, and so working in new music helped a lot with that, because you're not putting your performance up against, like you said, 200 years of history. And I guess I've just continued to walk down that path of realizing that it's my voice that is important. It's unique, it's special. I do have something to say, and I say it well, and that's all that matters to me. Of course, I have moments where I feel like, you know, why am I not playing concertos with orchestras? But I'm just not that kind of player, you know?
Do you feel like that's something you want to do? I mean,
there's just a little bit of insecurity that hangs on from my schooling that says that that's something I should want to do.
Oh, got it. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I'm, you know, you're teaching now, like you have, right?
I do teach. It's a unique teaching situation too, but yes, I do teach.
But teaching is teaching, and it's like I have students now, you have students.
Yeah.
You can see a little bit of like yourself in them. You can diagnose some stuff. Like, what do you see as your responsibility now on the other end, seeing a new batch of students coming in, them butting up against the very things that you butted your head up against, and then how do you, and is there anything from that struggle that you're really grateful for, that you're kind of like, you know what, that really sucked, but I'm really glad that happened? I mean,
okay, that's actually a huge question for me to answer. So I'm going to answer the first part.
Yeah.
And kind of, I'm just gonna try not to ramble too much. So
It's a podcast. That's what they're for.
okay. Oh yeah, that's right.
You can ramble all you like. I don't care.
That's right. Okay, so I don't teach music majors, and in fact, I don't teach trained pianists very much. So I have two different halves to my teaching work. The first half is, well, we're sitting in my living room right now. I teach kids here, like school-age kids. But it's very rare for me to work with a student who I think is going to be a music major. I'm just teaching them. I'm their piano teacher. And so my focus with them, sort of in response, in a way, to what I went through in music school, is just to find a way to express themselves, to kind of use music as that sort of release. And at the same time to use music as a way to learn how to set goals and achieve them. And sort of gain a sense of self-confidence and autonomy in that way. And I'm really passionate about doing that. So I guess I understand why my mom loved her job for so long too.
Yeah. What age range are you teaching?
My youngest right now is 7 and my oldest is 72.
That's awesome. Well, what are the differences in this? I mean, sorry, I go off on a million tangents.
Yeah, let's
so
do it.
if you don't answer the second part of the question, that's fine. But like, what are the differences and what are the similarities? And I'm not being glib here, in teaching a 72-year-old and teaching a 7-year-old.
Oh yeah. So they both. Oh gosh, they both get kind of. Actually, there's more similarity between a 7-year-old and a 72-year-old than there is between a 7-year-old and a 15-year-old. Because the people who are in their 70s, like retirement age folks who are taking lessons, and these young children, they're both have difficulty with the fine motor control. And so for the retirement age folks, it's often like arthritis and stiffness and awkwardness. They're not used to learning a new skill. And for the kids, it's like they're just developing these fine motor skills. They've never tried to move just their fourth finger before.
Okay.
And
I'd never thought about this, but it makes total sense.
Oh yeah, and so if you're asking someone to be musically expressive, and to carry a phrase and to put emotion into something, when they're fighting with their fine motor skills, that's a really unique challenge to come up against. And some really beautiful musicianship, I think, comes out of that limited technique. Actually, I'm really fascinated about by listening to people who have limited techniques still be very musical. In teaching some of the youngest students, I've been moved to tears by some of their musicianship. Sometimes they access something, even though they can't play an octave scale yet. So that's what those students have in common. Yeah.
And what, in terms of then, like, your view of the way like the educational systems work, starting with 7-year-olds, and I know that you're not actively in the school systems, but you've been through the school systems. I've been through state school systems and the music programs, and I've seen the way funding happens or doesn't happen or gets taken away. And like, when I was in high school, that was when they took out I remember home ec and industrial arts was like the two classes that went away. So
oh wow,
the cooking, and then at that time it was very gender based. I mean, it was the women went and did the cooking, and there were girls in the home ec or in the industrial arts class I took, but I was like, I want to make a clock, like that's what I did, But they cut those classes, both of them, because of funding, or our levy didn't pass. But then that feeds into the college systems where there's similar issues, but there's a whole other batch of different issues that then shoot these people, all of us, us, out into the world to be like productive citizens. And I personally, this is dovetailing a little bit into what we were talking about prior, a little bit about Facebook and the way that this stuff is talked about. I'm very curious as to why there's a lot of focus on, with all of these issues, on fixing colleges, but very little discussion around third grade music education,
Mm-hmm.
and how to diversify that, how to get gender differences in those classes, how to talk about like all the way that we talk about the history of the piano and the baggage, like those seeds can be planted in a healthy way with a third grader, or just how we talk about this stuff. I feel like we're very quick to staple new leaves on the tree rather than water the roots. And I'm just kind of curious if I'm like thinking about this in a weird way, or
No, I have a lot to say about that. So, that ties into what I was going to say about the second half of my teaching, which is I work at Wilmington College right now, which is a very small liberal arts college just north of Cincinnati in Clinton County, which is like cornfields, basically. 1,200 students in the school. I'm the only music faculty. That's full-time tenure track. Everyone else is an adjunct, so like adjunct choir teacher and adjunct band director, etc. No music major, just music minors. Most of the students who are music minors, their only musical training was band and choir. And they just love doing that, and so they want to keep doing that. Some of them have had some private lessons in something, but not anything very deeply serious or continuous. And none of my students, with the very rare exception, will go on to be professional musicians in any way. But a big part of my job then, because it's just a very small music minor, is teaching gen ed music so that students in the college can get their fine arts requirement out of the way.
Right.
So like a music appreciation kind of course.
It was called Bach to Rock whenever I was in undergrad. I hope that's such a weird title to have.
I don't structure my class that way.
Yeah.
But yes, like that, Bach to Rock, yeah.
This was 20 years ago too, so
Yeah.
I hope it's changed since then.
It's getting there. But it's so funny because when I ask my students to do something in class as simple as sing with me, they can't. And
They can or they won't?
Both.
Okay.
They really can't, though. I really do. Like, I do mean can't. They don't know nursery rhyme songs. They don't. They've never seen a violin in real life. You know. And so I definitely see in those classes that they just aren't getting any musical training at all, no musical exposure at all. That's if you're looking at the history of like live music making in this country or in-person music making, that's a new development as of like 2 generations ago. If you go back 2 or 3 generations, like much more likely to have had a piano in your house, much more likely to have had been in choir in elementary school or whatever it might be. Like, that stuff is going away. And so my students just don't know how to talk about music. It's very, very, very unfamiliar to them. And it really shocked me and surprised me when I first started teaching that kind of class.
I mean, as you were talking, it makes me feel like there needs I listen to a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson podcasts. I don't know if you've listened to his podcast called Star Talk.
I haven't, but I love him.
Remarkable. He's a national treasure, and it's just like whatever he's talking about, he's able to boil down quantum entanglement to a digestible thing where somebody like myself can be like, oh, and I feel like we need somebody that does that for society, for like what your tax dollars go for. Somebody that can help you understand what it is you're paying for. And then I feel like there needs to be somebody in the arts that is conveying to people. This is the argument that I always get frustrated, like having grown up in a small town, politically far leaning to the right, where I grew up hearing about supporting the troops and like we need to be strong. We're fighting the enemy and all this stuff. And I was like, listen, I'm all for fighting the enemy. I hate enemies. Like as a kid, I don't like enemies. So let's fight them. And I have family in the military. I have friends that were stationed in Iraq during the second war, and like, I get it. But then I was like, well, it seems like all the people we're fighting hate art and music and women and like all these things. It's just like, well, shouldn't we have all those things if that's the thing we hate?
Oh.
Or countries that don't have that?
Yeah.
Like, seems like that we should have a lot of it then, right? Like, we should have a lot of the arts. We should have a lot of respect for, like, all of these things that I'm like, well, there's a big disconnect here. Because you're closing, we're giving the Pentagon a $700 billion budget, but we're closing the home ec and the industrial arts from my class, from my high school, and then teaching Bach to rock and expecting that to be the sort of cultural foundation upon which the American soft power is based. Like, we have plenty of hard power. What we need is soft power, which is smart people who can be nuanced and talk about Queen, but could also talk about Beethoven.
Absolutely.
You know?
I'm with you 100% on that.
You know, and Parliament Funkadelic. Like, all of those things need to be in the same boat.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. All my students love music. I'm not saying that my college students don't love music.
Yeah.
They live and breathe for the music that they know.
Right.
But it's what comes into their earbuds.
Right.
And they've never understood that music is a tactile thing. It's a hands-on thing. It's a thing that you do with your body. It's not just something you listen to. You know?
Well, how much of it do you think though is like? I mean, I don't think I enjoyed any of my music history courses. I found all my old music history notes and I fell asleep because my notes trail off at the end.
Yeah.
And
I know what you're gonna. Yes, right.
But I had a teacher at Yale, Joan Panetti, who taught ear training there, and I was like, can you give me a lesson on Bach on the marimba? And she's like, sure. And she came to, I don't know if you know who that is, Joan Panetti. She's amazing. She's retired now. She came down and she's just like tearing apart everything I'm doing, and she's like, stop. We had been like working for 2 hours on this, on the G major prelude. Like, it wasn't even the hardest thing, you know. And she's like, did you know that Bach had 23 kids? And I was like, no. And she's like, well, he did, and he had to write a new mass every Sunday. Imagine how crazy he would have been. She's like, you're playing this like you're wearing a suit and tie at a funeral. She's like, play this like you got up and had to feed 23 kids.
Yeah. And
then go to your job in Leipzig or whatever. You know,
yes.
I'm like, oh, okay. Then I was like, oh, yeah. When Beethoven was writing, it probably smelled a lot different. Or Bach, it's probably smelled a lot different. Probably smelled like horse shit, you know? And like that, maybe I should try to play Beethoven's tempos. Yeah, they're really fast, but maybe when he was dying or getting older and losing his hearing, he wanted to hear what he saw.
Yeah.
And maybe that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and like, so anyway, just to think, like, context to me is the thing that is cut out of all of our studies.
Yes, 100%. And this gets back to what we were talking about earlier.
Sorry, I'll eventually let you answer the second part of the question.
No, it's fine. About how me feeling uncomfortable in the conservatory environment or the academy environment or whatever.
Yeah.
Is because there is this tendency, both within the institutional world of classical music, but also just within the general populace, to treat classical music as this thing on a pedestal that is a gift from God that we are not worthy of. And how dare you sully it with your mistakes and human attempts to play it, you know? And I think that's the wrong approach.
I think objectively you're right. I think that is objectively true, but you know, nobody listens to me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is beautiful, but and I'm very grateful that we have all kinds of music, though, is the thing. Like classical is just one of many to me. I don't know.
No, I think it is one of the disservices. I think it's one of the reasons why now with social media in the mix, and this will dovetail a little bit into what we were talking about leading up to the podcast. It's like social media, to me, I've been really horrified at the way, in the same way that I feel like educational institutions have to kind of cut the context out in order to just give you information, because that's what they feel like is happening.
Yeah.
Like the way people are online, for example, and I react when people are like, cancel Beethoven. And I'm like, what did he do to you? Like, honest to God, like, honest to God, what did he do to you? Like, and I understand where that comment's coming from. I get it. But I think if we knew more about him and knew that he was actually he didn't like any of his drafts and was constantly chopping them up and re-editing them, some composers alive today might be like, oh my God, that's what I do all the time. You know, when we look at somebody like Wagner, it's like, yeah, let's look at all of the context around everything. But also, are you personally passionate about the music that you care about so much that you're willing to build a building? I don't have to love that mentality, but that's not an uninteresting thing to talk about in context to why the rest of his music is this crazy grand. There's all the anti-Semitism. Yes, absolutely. But I think when we teach this stuff, like, these are people. They were all composers. And the Bach cello suites get progressively harder because I think Bach was hanging with a cello player and probably got the cello player really drunk by the fifth movement and was like, hey, can you try this awesome thing? And then that's why you open up the last one and it's just like things are flying around. It's because he was getting to know somebody and to know the instrument. But we don't talk about that.
Yeah. The context is definitely what makes something meaningful to me. I'm not a person who wants to just appreciate music as an object and that's it. I want to know the context of the music, and so in that way, the context of the music does affect whether I'm open to it or not.
Like, explain that. How so?
Well, if it's written by someone who's a jerk, then it's gonna make me feel like I'm.
Has that happened? Have you listened to something? Give me an example. Like, is there? If you don't want to give,
I don't want to call anyone a jerk.
No, it's fine. Well, let's maybe keep it to people who are 300 years or older, so there's nobody alive that.
Well, like the Wagner example.
Yeah. Okay. So, talk to me about that.
Wagner is very interesting to study and to think about, but I can't say that I can't say that I'm going to be carried away listening to Wagner.
I can't say that I would be either, just to be clear. I don't have a stake in the Wagner game at all. It's just...
Yeah, there's musical reasons and but then it's more the contextual reasons for me. You know, as I'm listening to the music, then my mind wanders back to, oh, wait, like...
This was also probably playing while at the Nuremberg rallies, you know, like, or whatever. Yeah, and those are things I think that are, like, that to me is necessary to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it's what makes Wagner's, like, to me, like, that's why we need to look at it and look at all of, like, a yes and approach, not a like, well, his music's so great. That's the art is the art. It's like, no. I actually don't want to cut anybody out of anybody's life, but let's just call balls and strikes here. Like, let's look at what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And then society can choose. But, you know, this was a real person. He walked the earth, had a huge impact on a lot of people, and we need to learn from it. And but, like, that same concept is happening today. Like, there's musicians there's a ton of musicians that I'm not going to call out publicly here, but, like, are objectively abusive people who are tax frauds, are some of them murderers, like but we have no problem giving them a VMA or, you know, an Oscar or a Grammy or whatever. And, like, I'm trying to, the reason the context thing is interesting to me, and I'm kind of asking a non-question question here, like, what do you think people, like, right now, who's the Wagner of our day, I guess is what I'm at, like, trying to think, what are the things that we're unaware of that 200 years from now people are going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys didn't realize this.
I mean, I think I can say pretty objectively that R. Kelly is going to be looked at that way.
Yeah.
Right? That's about to be, the verdict's about to come in for that right? trial. Yeah. I was just hearing about it on the radio today.
But his career was also, like, like, the ability for everybody to document everything, right? Like, that was, which is, I think, how he got away with a lot of stuff. But
And then that's why he got in such big trouble
Well,
now.
it's because he videotaped it, right? Like,
Yeah. He did. I mean, I don't even know. I don't pay
I haven't
close
watched-
enough attention, but what he's been charged with is enough for me to feel sick, you know?
one person that, I mean, Michael Jackson.
Oh my gosh.
But I'm just going to, there's a podcast called Constant Honesty, and I can't not listen to Billie Jean. Can't do it. I can't not do it. Like, you know, but that's the thing. I'm wondering if 200 years from now, like like Michael Jackson is somebody who has objectively had one of the largest cultural impacts. Everybody knows what the moonwalk is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
All over the world. In the same way that at the time, everybody might have known what Bayreuth was, you know, like what it's interesting to me to think about that stuff. And it doesn't mean I'm going to wake up and have an existential crisis when I listen to Michael Jackson. But when I think about Wagner, or I think about Beethoven or whoever else, I'm trying to think of it in that context. Like,
yeah.
you know,
I mean, as a teacher,
right.
When I'm presenting this kind of stuff to my students, I do exactly what it is you're saying. I present the full context. So if I was going to teach a lesson on Michael Jackson, I would say possibly the most influential pop star of all time. Also, this is what his life was like. And it's not my job to draw any conclusions. And actually, just in general in life, I don't think that it's my job really to draw conclusions. People are complicated. I know that's something that people say when they're like trying to stop cancel culture or whatever. I'm not trying to like align myself with anyone.
I'm in agreement with you 100%.
But I just think people are complicated. And, you know, in the way that I conduct myself, I just want to try to show people understanding and compassion and help them feel safe and help them feel like they can express themselves, help them treat each other more nicely. And that's it. Like, I'm not trying to send anyone and banish them to the woods forever. You know, like, I'm not, that's not what I'm about, really. Accountability, sure, but not canceling, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's the weird, I mean, it's the, like, we're in this time right now where what the definition of accountability is different for everybody.
Yeah, well,
And
yeah, that's very difficult.
And but that's always been the case. I mean, but how we adjudicate some of these things culturally, I think to me, where I have the existential crisis is when I have to start being like, well, this is my line for who I will listen to musically or whatever it is. Like, this is my line for who I'll let babysit my children. You know, that line is, I want to make that super clear.
Yeah.
But that line, I think for me, has to be different for who I listen to on the radio when I'm making coffee in the morning. Personally, for me. And it doesn't have to be that way for everybody. But when I start moving that line closer and closer to like a hard cut where I have to, then I feel like, well, I'm going to have to cut out a lot of people I love a lot, you know? And I think where I grew up in a very small town, it was not in your advantage to cut people out of your life.
Oh, that's interesting.
You needed everybody. Your dad was a farmer. I'll bet you my life savings that the guy 2 miles down the road is who's going to help him fix his tractor.
Yes, that is
so you
true.
can't go putting that guy on blast at the local coffee shop because he said something you thought was inappropriate, you know? And I think for me, I think I'm learning that this is my insecurity. I'm trying to be okay with that being something I can't actually change about myself. And I think these last 2 years is something that being stuck at home and having like that we've all had some sort of existential crisis on some level. Like that insecurity for me was the one I personally had to deal with the most. It was like, do I actually feel okay saying I listen to Michael Jackson or I listen to Mike Tyson's podcast.
Yeah.
He is an accused rapist, spent time in prison, pretty violent athlete, bit a man's ear off.
Yeah.
But also is now a pigeon farmer and is probably one of the most genuine people on a podcast I've ever listened to.
well, I can't do a podcast with someone who listens to Mike Tyson. This is over.
Well, and again, I'm not like a Mike Tyson like champion. I'm not like trying to get people to listen to his podcast. But to me, like if I would have cut Mike Tyson out of my life because of someone I don't even know, like I'm not even acquainted with him on a daily basis, I would have really missed out on a lot of really great information and other people that he talked to that I wouldn't have known. And I don't know, like that. I'm not quite. My insecurity is still like not quite solved, but is anything I'm saying like
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know. There's no question here. I'm just sort of puking out what I'm scared about, Brianna. I'm sorry.
Well, okay. I'm gonna pose the question to you if that's okay.
I love it when people
Turn the
ask questions.
tables. So, do you feel like any part of that journey for you these last 2 years relates to the fact that you're, at least by all appearances, like cisgendered white straight dude? Like, is that
in terms of
like that has been the demographic that everyone points to and says you have all the privilege, you have all the power, like sit down and shut up and let the rest of us fix the world that you all messed up, you know? Like is there any part of you that like is trying to grapple with that?
I think that I think my first reaction is yes, but I think for me that conversation, the thing I'm trying to get comfortable about saying out loud is that not you weren't painting with this brush, but when people say, oh well, the reason you said that is because of this, which happens more often than I see not on social media. Like when that's the response back, to me what that says is somebody is, or what I feel, whether or not this is true, my feeling is like you've literally said the most obvious thing to me, and then use that as a way to discount something I've personally, which I don't have any way to prove to anybody how much time I've thought about this stuff and how much personal like days of like crushing anxiety where I literally don't leave the room because I'm afraid that I'm gonna mess something up or it's just not worth it, I feel like what makes me not even want to enter those conversations is like, oh, all you got is your broad brush out. I'll do something else. I'll go talk to somebody else. And I think that reaction is happening a lot more than people are willing to or aware of. I think because that conversation gets shut down immediately with well, you're all these things, so clearly you must not understand this thing. For me, the beginning of the 2 years happened like George Floyd was murdered on TV for everybody to see. And we all had to watch it. I spend a lot of time working in steel band communities in New York and in Trinidad, and I am not at all claiming to be an expert at all on race. I've been very fortunate from a young age in high school to have been spoken to and been made aware of like police violence and things like that. Being in pan yards in Brooklyn where the cops walk in, they walk right by me and go search all the bags of the 8-year-old kids playing steel drums, And the white woman who comes up and calls the cops because of noise violation every rehearsal. Like, I see it. It happens. And it's gentrification, all that stuff. To me, I had a real hard time with the George Floyd thing, not because of like, yes, of course, he murdered that man. I'm sorry, that was murder in broad daylight. And like, but the broad brushes came out. All of a sudden, the medical community is saying racism is a virus. It's okay to go protest. As long as you're wearing a mask, it's okay to go protest. While at the same time, there's protests happening at state houses for, stop the steal or whatever it was happening on the right, and, but the people on social media, it was just like, because it was Trump, that didn't count and they're killing everybody. But meanwhile, 30,000 people in the streets all screaming at the top of their lungs was okay because it was racism. I'm at home locked in because I've also just come from visiting my two friends who lost their 2-year-old to a seizure. And we had to drive by them while they sat in their front yard and wailed like the craziest sound I've ever heard, Brianna. Like, we had to drive by them, and I couldn't get out of the car and hug them. They're 6 feet. They're like where that piano bench was. I had to drive by.
Yeah.
And it's on Facebook Live. You can pull it up and watch me get out of my car and go like, and get back in my car and drive 3 hours home. I get home, I'm told racism is a virus. It's okay to go out in public. And so this incredibly traumatic thing with George Floyd happens. It's not related to me. This traumatic thing with my friends, and I'm following all the protocols that the government is telling me to do, and the CDC, and everybody, follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. And I get home, and this trauma, like, now all of a sudden, and I just was like, I'm done. I can't actually process this because, yes, I'm a white straight male. Yes. But I just heard a sound from two people I love and care about more than anybody on the planet other than my wife. And I'm not capable of processing that. And I know that many people I work with, Black people, I know they hear those sounds too. And it's for different reasons. And I get it. But this moment, I'm sorry. Racism is not a virus. It is an ideology that plagues us as a society. But at this moment, when there's an actual virus going around, like, we can't equate those things and all of a sudden mash it up. And now we are 2 years later, and we're wondering why, as a society, we're all like baffled as to why like some of these things aren't working very well, and we're not talking about it well. And so, anyway, the long answer to your question was like, I feel like I'm a person who thinks a lot about what I do and why I do it. And yes, I am not cutting Steve Reich out of my life. Not going to happen. You can think, I guess I had to be okay with people that I care about thinking I'm a racist. Because I can't stop that.
Yeah.
If someone thinks I'm a racist because I associate with Steve Reich because of something he said in the 70s, that's fine. I can't solve that for you. I can't make you think otherwise. But you're more than welcome to come and see me hang in Brooklyn with 140 Caribbean pan players for weeks on end. And I'm not asking that you expect anything other than to then maybe judge me with that too in the mix. And if you don't know that about me, whose responsibility is it to teach you about that? And if it's my responsibility, like, as I played that out in my head, how to have that conversation, if somebody did call me out for the Steve Reich podcast that I did, like, I wrote out 1 million responses, like public apologies. And I couldn't do it because I just kept coming around to, I understand you're upset. I love this person. And I know you're upset that so-and-so in my family might have voted for Trump or doesn't want to get the vaccine or whatever. I understand you're asking me to cut somebody out of my life that I love, and I will not do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, it does, because well, it brings us to I was saying earlier that what I try to do is just to show the people in my life compassion and understanding, everyone I encounter. But that is always made more complicated when the idea of power comes into that equation. And as someone who in my life, I hold positions of power, I have to make decisions about who I give access to and who I don't. And so, what you're talking about with the protests and your friends who lost their child and Steve and all of these kinds of things, it's this really difficult, messy mix of positions of power, having access, having agency, and then personal relationships that get all tangled up in that. And I don't have any answers for any of it. I'm not suggesting that there's a right way to handle it or a wrong way to handle it. I'm just acknowledging, like, that's really hard. And that is definitely something I grapple with every day as well, in my professional life and in my personal life.
Well, it's one of the things, I mean, with the vaccine discussion right now, like, it's one of the things that I personally have, I mean, I'm vaccinated. I would get 12 more if they offered them to me. Like, I don't care. Like, pump me up, baby.
And you get a vaccine, and you get a vaccine.
I'd take it every morning if I had to. Like, and I'm totally fine with masking, like, all of the things. But for me, working in Caribbean communities a lot, when the vaccine thing came up, you start to hear everybody talk about, like, oh, the Black community is vaccine hesitant, and then you see a post about the Tuskegee experiments, and, like, well, this is why, and it's like, you know, then, oh, well, we'll just get over it, and you just hear all these discussions, and it's just like, oh my God. But on the ground, what was the vaccine that was sent to that community? The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, 1 dose. Why? Why do you think?
Well, I know why. There was the belief that because of instability in their, like, daily schedules, that they would be less likely to go back for a second dose.
And that's based on a presumption
Yes.
about a large group of people
Yes.
that basically they can't tell time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so 1 dose gets sent. What was the one vaccine that actually was halted because of blood clots?
Right.
The Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What's the one vaccine in New York that is not accepted by the WHO? The Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It may be now, but when, so anyway, just to be clear, it may be now, but at the time when, like, the New York Excelsior passed, like, all these things were being like, we're going to have vaccine requirements to eat indoors. There were 2 that were accepted. And so, like, to me, it's not rocket science. Like, you made an assumption about a large group of people, you gave them the 1 dose, that's the dose you pulled back, and now they're not really jumping at the bit to get another one. So, but then, after, again, to relate it to the George Floyd thing, where for 2 years, everyone is talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, as they should be. Totally support it. Nobody wanted to talk about the idea that by Carnegie Hall having a vaccine mandate, totally understand it, or by concert halls anybody having a vaccine mandate, who are the people who are excluded from those places by default? People of color. So shouldn't we have one DEIA meeting that's about that? No, because public health. Well, I thought racism was a virus. Like, to me, this is where, like,
I see that.
it's like all of when the rubber meets the road, I think I've just been shocked at how quickly people's ideologies go out the window, and then you just run to your own because you're afraid, and rightfully so. Again, it's like, I got all the vaccines. I don't want anybody's kid to die. I don't want anybody to get sick. But for 2 years, people have been talking to me about, like, literally everything in society is contributing to racism, and we need to talk about what type of doorknobs we have, what's the access, what scholarships are going where, like, all of these things are which they do, except when it came to the vaccine, and most people have no problem, you know. And it's like, I understand it, but I just feel like it's just so messy, I guess.
It's messy. That's exactly right. It's very messy. It has been messy. It's going to continue to be messy because that's humanity. Yeah. The problem is that policy can't be messy. Policy
has to be clear.
Has to be clear.
And I agree with that. It should be. Yeah.
And so with that, I mean, my school just announced a vaccine mandate for the student body last week. And the majority of the student body at the school where I work, they come from the kind of background that you and I come from, rural, Midwestern, small town. Or another portion of the student body comes from Cincinnati, Columbus City area, and both of those populations, they're not wanting to get vaccinated. So it's been very dramatic, for all the reasons that you were mentioning. It's messy. There's all kinds of reasons to not want to get vaccinated. There's all kinds of reasons to want to get vaccinated. And policy can't make space for humanity sometimes.
Yeah, yes. And that depresses me, Brianna. Like it's, and humans, I think, like our default is to be self-preservational. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. Like,
yeah,
our default MO is like
survive,
right? And so when you're fearful, you will say things that you clearly don't mean just to get out of the situation, right? And to say, to talk about people who don't want to get the vaccine as being stupid. It's like, well, okay, that's the same. It's the same. You've just said something that is kind of impossible to retort because I'm the one that has to prove to you why people aren't stupid, and that I'm on the defensive here. And you've said, and you're making a case that's like about medicine, and so like, and I agree with you that the vaccine, but the premise is one I can't really. I think your premise is wrong, and I don't know how to, like, you need to rephrase the statement. People who aren't getting vaccinated perhaps have complicated reasons. Like that's not that doesn't feel good to say. That doesn't feel good to say over beers. Like,
yeah, right.
But also people don't like to be talked down to. Like, this is the other part of like all of this that, in the new music community, that I feel is a problem there. I feel like that, and this is something that I have felt for a while, there's issues of race and gender, but there's also issues of class. And the new music community has a real bad issue with class. I have never felt comfortable at any new music hang I've ever been at. Like, because I don't think anybody there actually wants me to be me. And that is the Ohio bumpkin who likes to say things like "warsh" and, crick. And, like, I like weird colloquialisms. And, I have actively, and again, it's a first world problem. It's not a real, my life hasn't been suppressed in any real way. But when I think about moments when I actively am not being myself.
Yeah. Oh,
And if that's the goal I want for everybody, is to be themselves as quickly as possible, whether you're black, white, trans, straight, like, I want you to be you. And if that is trans, like, great. Yes. We'll be happier if everybody can just be themselves quicker. And it's like, in the new music community, I feel like, yeah, I'm definitely pretending, and I hate it. It is the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I'm kind of with you there.
Why do you feel that way? Like, what for you? Why do you think that is?
That I feel like I'm pretending when I'm in the new music.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I've worked my way through that in some ways. Like, I've adopted a little bit of the attitude, like, you're just going to deal with my Minnesota friendliness and that's it. Sorry, I'm going to be nice to you, But you mentioned that there's an issue with class, and I do think that there is an issue with class. In new music, just like with anything, in the classical music world, you have to pay to play, and there's name dropping that happens, and there's people scoff at you if you haven't heard of something.
There's no clapping.
Why would you clap there?
There's no good food.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm just calling balls and strikes. I spent a lot of time in pan yards in Brooklyn. There's great food, and they're usually served out of a pot that you wouldn't dare eat anything out of if you saw it in another restaurant, but it is the reason the food tastes the way it does.
And new music doesn't have good food.
I'll stand by that statement. Unless it's catered by Italy or something in New York, I stand by that statement. I have never been at a new music event or at a concert and been blown away by the food in the green room.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that's a silly thing to say. But.
No, I mean, so I was just recently named the executive director for the Cortona Sessions for New Music. Which,
Congratulations.
Thank you. I still can't believe it's real. It's a huge honor. The founder of the sessions, Michael Kirkendall, I'm so lucky he has faith in me that I can continue his vision.
Awesome.
And I think I wish we had him here in this room actually for this conversation about class and new music, because he also, Mike grew up in Kansas and Oklahoma, you know, like, and then he went to MSM, you know, and he and his wife Mary with the Cortona Sessions really worked hard to try to build a community where there wasn't a sense of hierarchy between the faculty and the students, and that where there wasn't a sense of you must do this right or you're a bad person. It was just a sense of exploration, creativity, and appreciation of beauty. Yeah. And I think he really did achieve that. But I also know, as I'm taking on the role of executive director, that I have to think really hard about these issues of class and accessibility to continue this session. So, for example, it's been run in Italy for a decade. Very expensive to get there. Yeah. And we, as an organization, try to offer people as much funding as we can, but all of our funding comes from tuition dollars and a few small donors. Yeah. And so if a student gets a scholarship, it's because that money came from another student. You know, it's right. And then there's the question of whether we should have application fees or not. There's the question of,
my heart is warming right now. We do a summer festival called SOSI.
Yes.
And so I'm with you. I'm in the same pool and the water's cold, so it's
yes. It's hard. It's hard it's because I think it's really important to offer people these kinds of experiences of collaborative music making and working with faculty who really care about them. And also, for a lot of the students, traveling to Italy was their first time experiencing a culture outside of the United States. And what a beautiful culture to experience. Italy is amazing. And that's a valuable experience. So how can we make that more accessible to people who come from a different class background, such as lower middle class Midwest, you know?
Or lower middle class Brooklyn. Yeah. I mean, like, the class issue to me, and this is the thing that like has kind of frustrated me a little bit, is like, you can't just say, well, let's make this room half black and half white and then we're done.
No,
like, we figured it out because we took a picture, and it's like, well, okay. But within that, you've got rich white kids, you've got middle class white kids, you've got, same goes for Indian kids, same goes for Spanish, same goes for whatever. And then, you know, but then you've got a wealthy black student who can absolutely pay to fly to Italy if they wanted to. But then you've also got a kid whose parents are on food stamps, who for them a sliding scale where paying $20 is a huge investment, and that person can feel like, you know, it's important to understand that is, if you don't deal with class, then you're only going to get a certain class of all of these people. And is that what we want? And if the answer to that is yes, that's okay if you feel that way. I don't agree with you, but at least own that. And I feel like eventually when the community hits that class issue, I feel like it's going to get interesting, I think, because you know, because I think it affects the type of rep that gets commissioned.
Yeah.
You know, do large institutions want, just a question out loud, do institutions want lower middle class kids? That's just a question out loud. You know,
it makes me think of when I have brought guest artists to Wilmington College to perform in the past, and by and large, the student population at our school is lower middle class, and I've brought experimental musicians, and sometimes the students are deeply engrossed and fascinated and love it, and they're like, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen, and this is amazing," and sometimes they just laugh at something that in the new music community we are supposed to like venerate it or respect it or be quiet and listen and then applaud when it's done. But my students just laugh at it, you know. And so are these institutions willing to embrace people who come in with a different perspective and say, That's ridiculous. What are you do? What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say, just to sort of come around, and I mean, I've already stolen an hour and 10 minutes of your life, and it flew by. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it, and I feel good about the first in-person one. So I'm
Okay.
very grateful. I was nervous up front. I'm no longer. I'm very grateful. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in terms of some optimism, I would say that the one thing I am also clocking on social media, just to sort of put in a positive plug for social media here, even though I loathe it most of my day, is there is a lot of activity in the new music. The period in which the four of us were scrapping and like really trying to break through a wall that was in front of us, where there wasn't a whole lot of great percussion rap. In 2004, there were like some major pieces, but there wasn't a lot of, and so we were like, and there wasn't any pieces that were like 35 minutes long, you know, drumming and Xenakis pieces. Like there's a few of those, but like we want to be like a string quartet. Like, why can't we play a whole second half of one piece? There was us, and there was another handful of folks, but now I look and there's like 15 or 20 groups doing that all over the place and in various different genres and stuff. And I have a little bit of like, oh my God, like, you know, like they're on our heels. Like, what are we doing? But also like relief a little bit that the wall that we're all hitting on, there's just more hammers now. Like, thank God, like the wall's just going to come down quicker. And, and I think will come down in bigger pieces over time than it maybe has in the last 20 years of our graduating from school. I feel like this is the one thing that we don't as human beings clock well, and it's progress. We clock tragedy, and we clock, you know, mistakes and things we hate really well. But it is objectively true that since 2006, when I graduated from Yale and went into the workforce with it's night and day. It's not done, and it's not at the finish line, but I think for students who are coming up now who feel despondent about something they're seeing, like, yes, clock it as a data point that you see, but also trust that there's a million other hammers out there, and we're here. And maybe you don't see Josh on social media like banging every time there's something coming up, but just know the hammers are there, and we're all, you know, and that's the thing. I feel like that's the hardest thing as a teacher. That's the hardest thing. I haven't figured out how to express that to my students yet. You know? Right.
We're here. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Brianna, I am very grateful for your time, and my policy with the podcast is the door is always open for anything else. If you're coming to New York, want to link up and do a chat, you want to hop on Zoom, you got a new project coming up, or there's something that you heard me say on another podcast that pissed you off.
Yeah, I want to fight you.
You want to fight? We've met in person, and we are now fighting buddies.
Okay.
And I'm grateful for that.
Good.
Do you have any final words or anything you want to say before we wrap up? Like, where can people look you up if they're interested in stuff you're working on?
So you can just find me on social media. I'm trying to build my Twitter following. Not great at Twitter. Great at Facebook, Instagram. Everything's just my name, Brianna Matzke. And my project is the Response Project. So theresponseproject.org. It's a commissioning project that we didn't even really talk about at all.
We can talk about that for a second. Like, what is the Response Project?
It's a commissioning initiative where I ask artists to create new works in response to something that's pre-existing. So,
like, can you divulge any details?
Yeah.
That sounds
interesting. I've done 4 big projects and then some small offhanded ones. Always at the center of it is new music for piano, written by a handful of composers. But artists from all kinds of disciplines are also invited to participate. And I just pick something that is existing previously, like the artists find interesting, and then we go with it. So the very first one was a response to Stockhausen's piece Microphony 1.
Yeah. Is that the Tam Tam? Yeah.
With the microphones.
You have hung out with Al Oddie.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the car.
Yeah. That did come from some of his students, that idea. And I did a huge response project to Bob Dylan's album Highway 61 Revisited.
Oh, nice.
The most recent one was a response to Pauline Oliveros and her sonic meditations. So
That's a really cool concept. I had never, I mean, the idea of a concept behind a commissioning project isn't new, but that particular version, I don't know that I've heard anybody do it that specific way. And I think it's really, I like the idea. I'm always like, I bristle a little bit when people are like, just let the composer bring you their dream. I'm like, I'm a percussionist. I'm going to have to haul it all around.
yeah.
I'm not,
Right.
their dream may be my nightmare. Like, can we talk for 2 seconds about what you're doing?
Right.
And the idea of like having a relationship with a composer where they're like, maybe they don't have any clue who Stockhausen is.
Yes.
And that's a limitation, maybe, in a way.
Yes.
I think limitations are very powerful and actually can squeeze out things that you would never have yielded before.
Yes.
And so anyway, I'm really curious to see, are there pieces done and recorded, or like where are you in the process?
Oh yeah, that Stockhausen one was back in 2015. There's an album that came out of that. It's on the Response Project website.
Awesome, okay.
I've just finished, I recorded an album for another project, a Response Project with Heinel Pivnik, who's a New York-based violinist. And that album's also on my website. The Bob Dylan stuff is all solo piano. That album is on, it's all online.
And what's your next? Do you have one in the can now? Like,
so the Oliveros one was with Chris Graham.
Okay.
And so he and I still need to, we did that project during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so we premiered everything in film form. And so the video premiere was very beautifully produced and edited. It's not a live premiere. It's a produced, recorded premiere. And so that's all on the website for people to watch. It's gorgeous footage. My videographer was amazing. But we haven't recorded the album. Like, we haven't gotten into a studio. So that's coming down the pipeline. And I'm talking right now with a group of women who are working on whale conservation. And they've asked me to join them to do a response project to bring visibility to their work.
Awesome.
It's still taking shape. There might be a trip to Norway in the works. I don't know. We'll see.
Are you like listening to whale songs and whale calls and stuff?
It's a little bit of that, but it's more about, so apparently whales play a huge role in absorbing carbon and
like through the surface area of their body?
Yes.
Like, okay.
And like really could, if we had a higher whale population, we could offset CO2, which I didn't realize, but that's what they wanted to draw attention to. So
I'm
anyway.
all team whale all day. Let's do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
More whales.
This is such a well-known fact in the conservation community that there's this new effort to build plants that suck CO2 out of the air in Europe. And the plant, like factories or plants or whatever you want to call them, it's called the Orca Project. Like, they named it after whales because they know that is
meaning like they're making power plants.
Yeah, that
whose job it is
CO2 out of the air.
So do they then put what's the byproduct?
I don't know enough about it, but yeah. So
wow.
Anyway, that's probably going to be the next thing.
Well,
yeah.
That sounds awesome, and I think it gives us an excuse to do 2 more podcasts in the future. One about the Oliveros and one about the whales. Like that. That's awesome. And anyway, again, Brianna, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was just a salve to be in a room with a person and not have to deal with Zoom delay.
Oh my gosh, I love real conversations.
Holy
this
shit.
is great.
It's been great. So thank you so much, and until the next time, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on, in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in Pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out.
And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.